Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Social Innovation Talks here at Benilde HIFI, the Benilde Hub of Innovation for Inclusion. At the Peter D. Garucho Innovations Institute. I'm Nolly, the Community Manager of Benilde HIFI. And together with me is our Director and TBI Manager, Mr. Paul Pajo.
Hello, everyone.
Mr. Pageman himself. And of course, our very special guests, the authors of the Startup Mindsets book, Mr. Earl Valencia and Mr. Dan Gonzales. Welcome to Benilde Hi-Fi.
Hello, hello.
Earl and Dan.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so
Oh yeah, this is great to be here.
yeah, I mean, we're recording this during the first week of March, and it's been really hot out there. I hope you guys, I know you're bringing the heat with your new book.
Oh yeah.
How was the book tour so far?
Oh man, I didn't know it'd be like this. I just am used to like staying at home and working from home, so it's great. It's great.
We
I'm
all
loving
got
it.
used to staying at home for the last 5 years, right? But now you guys have a book. So can you please perhaps walk us through the whole journey? Perhaps we can start with Earl being Mr. X Idea Space and a whole other too many to mention enterprises. So, Mr. Earl, I've been following your journey for the past 10 years as well.
Great,
Being a part of the Philippine startup ecosystem. Of course, Mr. Paul brought you here. Do you also want to ask him things if you?
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe Earl can.
Yeah. So you were sharing your journey earlier with how you got where you are right now. Perhaps just a short introduction.
Yeah. So I guess for the listeners of the podcast, my name is Earl Valencia. I have a couple of hats now. I mean, obviously we're, Dan and I are co-authors of the Startup Mindsets book. But I grew up in Manila most of my life. I went to Zobel, so it's a LaSalle institution, from first grade 1 to fourth year high school, and then I went to UP Diliman for 2.5 years for engineering, and then I got actually, I don't know why, when I was young, I just saw that engineering in the US was 4 years and here was 5, and I was 17. I was like, oh wow, that's 1 year of my life. I felt it was a lot, 5% of my life. So I said, oh, maybe I should go to the States. So ended up moving to the US to Boston University with a dream of going to actually PhD after, especially across the river in MIT. I ended up not going to PhD, but I graduated top of my class in undergrad for engineering. And so, it's funny because I got an offer to go to MIT, but I didn't go. But I ended up actually going to an interesting role, which is doing classified defense work for the US DoD through Raytheon, right?
Wow.
So Raytheon is now the largest aerospace company in the world.
Do you still have your clearance? Because now, like, Doge
No,
and everyone
yeah.
are canceling the security clearances, right?
I think it's already a while, but no more. But it was an interesting work, and I'm telling you the start of that because that's actually where a number of my big ideas came from perspective of like, what is the possible if you had funding or money. So one of the projects I was in, which I can't disclose, the first thing that someone said was, there is no budget constraint. We just need to solve the problem.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow. So it's an engineer's dream. It's an engineer's dream because I didn't have to think about anything else but to solve the problem. And I realized that that's actually like what we have to think, right? Like we can't think constraint, and if you don't think constraint, then you solve actually hard problems. Lo and behold, I by accident I was actually doing a PhD again, and then this is the second time I kind of dropped out or rejected a PhD. I was PhD of aerospace in USC, and then I applied by accident into Stanford. I was one of the first, if not the first, admit of the school never to take the GMAT, which is like a big MBA exam, because they were trying to find scientists and engineers, and I was the experiment of the school. So I ended up going to Stanford, and actually that's where I got exposed to Silicon Valley. I go there for vacation, but I never knew what's going on. I envy Dan who grew up there, but I was there and I had to move there. No real concept of what it was, but it's the first time to hear terms like venture capital, startups, innovation. It was just like a crazy, like Disneyland for tech people. It was crazy. Did some VC work when I was there, and then ended up going to Cisco. Cisco, I ran innovation globally for their platform. And then with that, I guess someone discovered me. A number of folks in the Philippines realized that I was Filipino, and they invited me to actually give talks here. So I was here on my wedding, and then I gave talks, PLDT, the SM Group, San Miguel, etc. And I didn't know what it really meant. Some of them were even surprise visits. And yeah, when I came back here on vacation, someone said, "Hey, you know what? There's this guy who really wants to meet you. He's flying in from Hong Kong, and his initials is MVP." And I didn't know who he was. Yeah, I didn't know who he was, to be
Some
honest
guy
with
from
you.
Hong Kong.
Because I was only here for 3 days, and I had the party on a wedding on a Saturday night, and someone said, "No, you gotta wake up because your meeting is at 9 a.m." The wedding venue, I think, was in, I forgot. I think it's Sofitel or something, which is not there anymore. Yeah, it was here. But I was gonna leave on a Monday, so I only had Sunday to like hang out and stuff. And then so I was like, "Oh, someone wants to meet you, but it's 9 a.m." I'm like, "But it's already, it's like I wanna be here. I wanna party." Right? But it was a crazy time, and we can talk about it later. But ultimately, that then became I talked to MVP, and then he kind of agreed to fund one of the main idea, which became Idea Space. Built out a number of these things here. Worked there for about 4 or 5 years. Moved to the U.S., worked on the tech side of Wall Street, algorithmic hedge fund called Bridgewater, Charles Schwab, etc. And then built a startup, Lantina. We exited it, and then now I have a couple of roles. One is in an AI of Microsoft and their HQ. But then really my main role in the Philippines is that I'm part of the National Innovation Council, representing the entire business sector of the country. So that's generally my story. And Dan, is kind of like my co-conspirator to write this book. It took us about 4 years to do it.
Congrats. That's
It was
long
really a
time.
work of heart. Like there's many times that Dan and I were in a number of calls, right, and said maybe this is not for us, right? Like we wrote it, what we're gonna do with it. So again, things happen for a reason. So I'm glad that the book is out. So Dan, go ahead.
Man, Earl.
Go ahead, Dan. Yeah, that the Dan side.
Oh yeah. Wow, man, it's hard to follow Earl. I mean, Earl's a great. I feel like we're Batman and Robin, right? Like, like I play Robin for sure, but no, Earl's like somebody who I'm really good friends with. First, I think like we didn't have a business relationship at first. Like he always like it was just good to hang out with another Filipino person in the tech space, right? So that was a lot of I guess like mentorship, and then just also just figuring out what he's done in his career, and me being a young person in their 20s wanting to be successful too. Why don't I hang out with this guy? Maybe his success could rub off of me. But yeah, that one. But yeah, like Earl said, I'm born and raised in San Francisco. The parents are from Cebu, and my family's from the Philippines, really. And it's kind of a full circle moment to come back to a place where you're from, but you didn't grow up in, and you just get spoiled as an American, and you don't really like value where you're from, right? Like if people ask me where I'm from, like I'll say San Francisco, but I'm really from here. Like it's not exactly like what's that word, like
Disembodied.
Yeah, it's you could be from two places, right? Like I think that your identity is largely shaped by who you're
They
from.
call us third country kids, right? You're like you have like different countries.
Yeah.
Third culture
Third
kids.
culture kids. But yeah, anyway, I went to UC Riverside, and I got an English degree there, and I wanted to do business, right? But like yesterday, I was telling Earl, I couldn't pass math class. Like I couldn't pass algebra. and I got stuck sitting with the English. They make it too hard, man. But I think a lot of them are jealous now because I got the Startup Mindsets book and they never they never
You're
wrote
the
a
best
book.
of both worlds. You get to write it and you get to talk about the startup ecosystem at the same time.
Yeah. What I was gonna say was I don't think like degrees, like there's such a big emphasis on education. Like, I don't think degrees should be like the thing you base your career off of all the time. Like, there's a lot of opportunities in the world, and even now the degrees are getting outdated because of this AI talk. So, it's a little bit scary. But yeah, I also, like you guys, have a podcast too, and we use that podcast to put stories into this beautiful book you see right here. And
It's actually the name of your podcast, right?
absolutely, yeah. We had the idea for the book first, and I guess we just made a podcast. I didn't know what I was doing even when I started that.
So that's interesting. You had an idea for the book before you did the startup.
We did.
The
Yep.
podcast first before the.
Oh no, the book was.
Okay. Right.
But it's made us some money, and I can't be what do you call that, unhappy with that. And
Mm-hmm.
starting an LLC too, like we talk about in the book, that you don't, for people who want to be an entrepreneur, you gotta file like a corporation, right? Like, it's not just let's send somebody a like a check or like an invoice or something. I think it's more
Right.
like you gotta be formal and professional, right?
Adulting side.
Adulting side, taxes, things like that. But yeah, happy to be here, man. I flew all the way from San Francisco, so crazy.
Yeah. Wow. So just a short segue. How did you guys meet? Where was that?
Yeah. Earl was doing a talk at a venture capital fund. I was doing like a small apprenticeship internship with in San Francisco. They were called VU Venture Partners, and I was in the frontier tech side, so I was like investing in hardware startups and just maybe space tech. And Earl, yeah, he was doing a talk, and I came out of a meeting and
Kababayan.
yeah, kababayan.
He thought I was Mexican.
Yeah.
No way.
Thought he was
Oh,
Mexican.
perhaps.
Yeah. It was a busy day, so I was like, oh shoot, Filipino guy in the same room. Really? Wow. And Earl, you could tell. Like, some people you can't tell they're Filipino, but Earl's got the Filipino accent. So it was cool, and I just walked up to him and said, "Hi, Earl. I think
That was your pitch.
yeah, I can help you write this book." And then he's like, "Oh." But you never.
You proposed the book idea right away, or
Earl did, but I just said I could help. I think it'd be
Okay.
cool. But he was so kind. Like, he said you could write it too. And
this was in 2021, right?
2019,
19. Oh, okay. I see.
2020,
I guess
2019.
I'll say the pre-pandemic phase, and then the world
Oh, yeah.
crashed. Right?
Yeah. I think it shows, like, going to meet people in person. Like, you get more value from doing something in real life rather than a Zoom call or like a FaceTime.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of you build better friendships. You make trust easier,
That's
and I
true.
guess you I guess that's how work has always been, really. So that's following what's been the recipe for a while. But yeah, I think the work from home stuff is good too. But there's always something about people coming together to work on something that they both want something from.
That's why we had you guys here to do the podcast on site, right? Instead of a Zoom option. I know you've been doing your book tours, and you have that experience. Your book is on Amazon and fully booked, right?
And where else is it?
The Penguin website. Do they have a shop there?
Amazon,
Right.
fully booked.
Right.
It was on Barnes & Noble, but then it got removed.
Right.
Barnes & Noble.
And I heard from Paul earlier that is this the first book on business from Penguin Southeast Asia, Random House, Singapore. Is it?
Yeah, so Penguin is so again, we're not sugarcoating it or anything like that, but our dream publisher was Penguin.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Of course.
It is the most. I think it's
They have the
it's like
best-
the Andreessen
they have
Horowitz
the
of
best book covers in the
Andreessen Horowitz of
right,
publishing,
as a
right?
designer, right?
But when we were approaching them, they actually said that, not necessarily, but they said that they're one of the few maybe less than 10 in history of Penguin that are Filipino authors that are in the
Wow.
business side, and very few actually focused on startups and innovation, right? So, our goal was how to propagate this idea of startup mindsets to the world, and we think that with the platform that Penguin gives us to propagate the rest of the world, like imagine that you'll have it in in Australia, in India, in the US, now in the Philippines. I did it, one of my friends, Kelly and Max, they took a picture in Kuala Lumpur, right? This is the power of a book, the power of a book specifically published by a top publisher, right? And the reason why it was so important, because we think that the startup mindsets by default, we created it so that we can democratize the idea to the rest of the world. The rest of the world, right? So we feel that this is the right platform. I know people say it's digital is fine, but we think that the book is a different type of vehicle of your idea, right?
You get to hold it, and you get to sleep beside it, right? And you get to put some notes.
So, Dan and Earl, maybe you can walk through the process, right? So, I was talking to Earl about the manuscript and all that, but I guess it's like a startup, right? Because you need to pitch the book to publishers, and there are many stories, right? You got rejected by, so maybe that's the well, I want to see where the sausage is made part that normally no one wants to talk about because it's unglamorous, it's very painful. So maybe since you've gone through that, yeah, maybe that's that part of the story you can tell our SITALKS listeners.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. No. Although I probably have it, right? But I mean, I think writing a book was something I always wanted to do. Like, I had an English degree, and I wanted to write a book even in college. But I wanted to write a novel, and this is like
The Filipino American novel.
I could try that maybe. But
American novel.
Carlos Bolosan, but for Silicon Valley. So
oh wow, that's a good idea. Yeah, and getting into business, I didn't really have much business experience other than one time Slack asked me to be a receptionist for them, and I didn't know what Slack even was, and all of a sudden I'm trying to learn what Slack is, and then going in San Francisco, there's like hundreds of startups, right? And I didn't really like them at first. I actually thought that they were making the city worse, and like I couldn't afford living there anymore, and all that. But I was like, oh, what if I took the opposite approach and like invested in them and was a part of them? They were cool. Like they give you free food at lunch, and sometimes sometimes they the good salaries and things like that. They do solve a lot of things that the world could use, right? And sometimes it's not really necessary things either. Like just technology. You wonder, like, is that really a real use case? But well, I guess like that happened. Like you would just see the rise of funding, and you'd see always in the news like this team raised $50 million, right? And it's everywhere, and people are trying to recruit you for jobs. So you get a taste of what happens when investors see something that they want to invest in, and there's people on the other side who want to run a startup too, and there's that. But I guess like going back to the question about the trials and tribulations of writing a book, I don't think anyone who has written a book will say that it's easy or is simple, and I mean it's a little bit hard for me to believe I even did this. It's like.
So like, what's the start? Like,
what's the start?
Maybe like how did how does the writing start, and what's after writing? Like, because people think just write a book and then it just magically becomes a book. Yeah, walk us through like the steps. Yeah, maybe then Dan can walk us through the steps from idea to publication.
Yeah, well, I think there's like, so people can follow like their own steps, right? Like it's maybe like making chicken adobo. Like people have different recipes, right? Like it's not always gonna taste the same. So what we did was we had the idea for the book. We came up with the title first, which was kind of, you need to do that first, right? You don't know what to call it. And then we came up with a title, and then Earl had some content chapters already put together, but we needed to do research and interview people like personally, so we did the podcast with that. But for the book, yeah, I remember staring at a blank Google Doc and trying to write something that'd be interesting, and we came up with a manuscript that had a lot of what do you call that? Unfinished things that made zero sense to. And then once we get the deal with Penguin, you negotiate a book deal, and then you.
But that took, but that
Right.
from that to
It's
Penguin, it's like 2+ years.
It sounded like we got the Penguin, but
No, not again.
Oh yeah, we were pitching a lot of random publishers.
okay. So Penguin was not the first, or it's part of the right.
Maybe you can go through that, right?
Yeah, like how many publishers
The
did you
first
pitch it
time
to?
it's a manuscript, and then what happens? You pitch the manuscript. Do you actually iterate the manuscript based on what the publishers talk about, or the manuscript stays the same? And is there like a date? You're an English major, right? So I'm guessing your school would have a cache of
Writers?
successful writers, and do they
I mean-
coach you how to do it? There's a database of publishing companies. Hey, try this out. Would be perfect for you.
Oh man, I think it's less than 1% of people in the world who want to make a book even get halfway there. Like the
Wow.
the school I went to, yeah, they had some good authors. I mean, maybe good writers, but I don't even know if any of them wrote a business book to begin with. And Stanford has a lot, right? You think about just the thousands of people from Stanford who've written a book and all that. But we asked for help, right? Like, and they can only help you so much. It's not like they'll give you a book deal. And it was a big mess, really. Even for me trying to explain how we did this was a big mess. Like, there was rejections too. So you need to make a book proposal and submit it to them and try to get an agent sometimes. But yeah, we got rejected. Some people said this didn't make any sense, or like we don't want. Yeah. Some people said we needed to pay them too. I didn't.
Wow.
We did it. We did.
Some gatekeeping there.
So some people. So there's like three. There's these three situations. So so this is something that we didn't know. The book. So we thought that people write books because of the pureness of sharing it. But for a lot of people, it is like a branding thing for them. So they're willing to pay for people to say, like people.
They get ghostwriters, right?
Ghostwriters and all, and say, hey, by the way, I'm willing to pay some amount of money so I have a book to the world because that helps my personal brand.
Right,
For
right.
Dan and I, we didn't even thought about that. We thought like, we have an idea, we want the world to know our idea, right? So we went to a number of publishers. There's three choices, right? Like some publishers, which was actually very like heartbreaking, they're like, you have to pay us for me to publish your book, because the demand of people who want to publish the book is so high that we can make a business out of this. So some person said, and very established, I didn't want to name the name, but very famous, very famous publishing house met with the editor-in-chief, right? And said, we love your book. We love your book. I think it's going to be great, but we reviewed your manuscript, and I think for it to be the right level, we need to invest. You need to invest through us $20,000 to $30,000 minimum. And we can. But I was like, what? We're like, what? Right? I mean, the other part is rejection. The hardest part is when you get excited and you're like, oh my gosh, this is it. And then they're like, oh, and then they're trying to deal make you.
Right.
There's one. A lot of big publishers actually say, we don't go straight through authors. You need to go through these agents.
Right.
So we tried to look for agents,
the
and
system.
the same again. Different grift, yeah. And then guess what? Some of these agents, because we're not an established authors, for us to work with you, you gotta give us also an advance, maybe a couple thousand.
Right,
So
it's all about the book advance. And
right. So but we have to pay them. But we're like, why is that, right? But we knew that the best publishing house in the world, like there is always a chance, we felt, putting our startup mindsets on,
Mm-hmm.
if we just keep at it, maybe one will say yes. It's kind of like VC pitching, right? Like out of 100, hopefully one says yes. We just applied the same thing. We just emailed all the different, there's different, places in the world, different publishing houses.
Mhm.
At this point, this was during the pandemic, right?
This is during the pandemic,
Which
yeah.
makes sense. That means you had now all the time in the world to actually email this because you're at home.
We're just like keeping at it, right?
Right, right.
With again, this manuscript that, to be frank, I mean, I think Dan is honest, and I'll be more honest, right? Like there were a lot of holes, right? It was 40,000 words or 35,000
Mhm.
words, but
Mhm.
some chapters were kind of not very good, right?
We didn't use AI either.
We don't use AI. We don't know no AI, no anything,
on that
right?
que-
no,
on
no
that
AI,
question,
yeah.
do you like? Is there like a manuscript freeze? Because now you're shopping it around, right? You're looking for the publisher. Do their comments actually factor in? Like, do you actually, are there versions of this? Like maybe, hey, you should include that, or is that the same manuscript that you're, looking for a publisher? Or do their inputs like, say, hey, maybe you should add this? Are you during this time? Are you changing the manuscript, or it's on like code freeze? It's code freeze.
I don't think so. Like their advice was not like substantial, and you know what I mean. Like I think they said it wasn't good enough, or
But not
Right.
granular to the point that
Yeah.
edit something.
not granular to the point. I mean, in a business book, yeah, you have to be very concise, and I don't know, just straight. You have to make sure that what you're saying makes sense, and that's really hard to do for anyone. So shout out to Cassandra, the video editor. I mean, not the video, the writing editor, content editor we had.
Right.
She changed the way that the book sounded. we really
Was
wrote
she part
two
of
books.
Penguin Random House?
So,
Okay.
so what happens is, again, all these, yeah. So all these three things, right? And then eventually, after 1 year of up and down, we thought we're gonna give up. Maybe we'll just self-publish and
Mhm.
whatever, or even self-publish. Even we know the book wasn't really good enough, good get. But we're like, we just need to do something. And then I don't know what. I mean, I don't know if it's destiny or or God or whatnot.
Of course.
All of a sudden they emailed us and said, hey, we knew it was a while since we got back to you,
Mhm.
but we reread again your proposal that we got almost a year ago, and we think that there's something there.
Mm.
And I
What happened? I
called
wonder.
Dan and I said, I think this is a scam or a joke or whatnot. Like, I wonder if this
It's
is
a
true.
Slow book news cycle.
Yeah, right. But obviously we met with the managing editor. We were so lucky that Penguin just opened up an office in Southeast Asia,
Ah.
and they
That's
said
great.
the
That's
the
great.
Southeast Asian managing editor picked up our proposal. And again, to Nora, thank you, right, for taking a chance on us. And then once we struck the deal, they gave you a whole list of a team, which is great, right? It's kind of like accelerator, right?
Right.
They'll give you a content editor named Cassandra, super smart. She basically like cut our book in half and made us rewrite more than half the book.
Wow.
You know,
Tell us the story about how she made you add another the chapter, the first
oh yeah,
chapter.
yeah. So for example, what did make sense?
Uh-huh.
So we have this whole book with an outline, blah blah, and then the first thing she said, like, I don't even know what a startup mindset is, but you go straight away. So you gotta write a whole chapter.
Right. You have to intro.
Oh, what? It's not even the intro. So intro is about
Uh,
the why, maybe
Right,
like why you
right,
wrote a
right,
book
right.
typically, and maybe
Preface,
some
yeah.
story there. It's like fundamental, the definition as the foundation. I didn't think it was important because I knew what a startup mindset was, but then obviously they produce books multiple times, so that's a brand new chapter from scratch we didn't have. We had obviously a busy number of chapters that we had from scratch, and then I remember there was some redlining that I remember Dan writing this obviously before we submitted it, and I just saw probably 5 pages of red, and it says take out. And I felt bad. I felt bad for Dan because it's mostly like he wrote it, and I knew it took a lot of time.
Right.
But it's basically like, sorry, it doesn't flow. It was kind of a thing, and we were like, okay, so this, so but yeah, but they need to think about the flow, and maybe this is the same thing where we adopted our own Kool-Aid, right? Our own startup mindsets where it's hard sometimes to iterate on your baby, right? On the things in your mind, but we just had to like always remind ourselves like, why are we writing the book, right? We wrote a book for this, and even if it kind of sucks and we had to like work on it in very tight deadlines, like we had to rev this book probably like I don't know how many times, but we still did it, right? Which is kind of cool. There's like there's a content editor, and then there's a structural editor, which basically will make sure that all of these things make sense. There's, if you talk about at the small thing, I was like, according to blank, like it has to have a reference very quickly. You know, verifying, let's say, everyone that you put into the book, all these things. So that's a structural editor. The book cover was fun. Fun because it very, so we had our own designer. Actually, one of my designers from the startup world were like, hey, we should make a book cover. So we proposed to them our book cover, and they're like, no, not good, right? So they gave us book covers.
It's very interesting.
And the one thing that shocked me, and then I'll give it to Dan, right? The one thing that shocked me was, we'll only give you 2 or 3 times to choose the cover. After this, we will make the decision.
Wow.
Because basically because it is a Penguin book, it is not necessarily your book.
The branding is Penguin, of course. It has to be.
No. So basically, when you work with a publisher, you give them the rights for the book. So yeah, so basically they will help you as an author, but technically they're like a VC, right? They already own part of your company, so they have also veto vote, right? So that's something also that was very like, maybe I didn't know, but I was like, oh, interesting, surprising for me. But guess what? You know, after now, actually the cover grew on me, right? I actually liked the cover, but at the time I was like, what the hell is this cover? You know, it was blue, but the one thing we liked was red, right? We like red, but it was
so
blue.
They gave you that.
Yeah, we gave us the red, but we had other like covers. Actually, maybe when we're older, we'll actually have to look at the other cover. It's kind of funny when we look at it.
Yeah.
So, anyway, Dan, any other thoughts here?
Maybe also talk how many publishers did you actually go through before, like 100, 200?
It's kind of like finding a wife, right? You need to go through like the bad girls to to know what's a good girl, right? but
Like a perfect match.
but
50, huh?
I guess to piggy off what something Earl said was like we had various iterations, and we didn't know when to like say this is good or not. We think we could. It's like you always think it could be better, and then you ask people for their opinion, and you don't know what direction to go, and it's kind of like the time of the deadline is tomorrow, and then the deadline gets pushed into another week, and then I'm in the couch eating chips. Like it's like, but something I wanted to say was somebody we interviewed, he said perfection doesn't exist, and like I agree. Like this book is cool and all, but it's not like exactly like perfect, right? There's nothing that's perfect, and it's always something that you got to let go of your ego too, but absolutely, but you got to let go of control, because it's like there's gonna be people who say like this is a bad book. Like sometimes, one time we read on Barnes and Noble, like somebody said it was a bad book, and I wanted to find out who that was. But I think that's the beauty of creating something, like whether it's a startup or a book or cooking or music, right? Like whatever it is, there's gonna be people who don't like it, but I think that you got to be able to accept that people are gonna have differing opinions, and I mean we're not here to be crowd pleasers. We're just here to say what we believe in, and that's kind of where we are.
I just have a question. You mentioned art and like as in music, right? Like there's always there's this question among artists: when is it done?
Oh
Like-
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
how did you guys decide on how to close the chapter of the book? This is it.
You're right. There was really no
There's no
choice.
deadline.
There was the deadline to, I think it was summer, like August, right? Like
Yeah.
August of 24.
Yeah, they wanted to be sure that the book was out by like the Jan 15 was published date.
Oh
Right,
yeah,
right.
that's right.
So there is
Because-
a published date.
Because they were launching in Southeast Asia,
Yeah,
or
there
you're
basically
part
there
of
was
the.
basically there was a launch. I
Mm.
forgot what date was.
No, November 27th, 6.
Yeah, something like that. Like there was anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so there was, a hard deadline, and kind of like when you run a company, and you're the one who's in charge, it's kind of hard to give yourself a deadline, right? Just since you feel like maybe you could take another week. And I think with the startups, and to make a point, there's always got to be respect for deadlines, right? Like whether, it's because I was speaking to a venture capitalist at Creative Ventures, James Wang. He was saying that startups, they technically can be professional dilettantes, and I don't even remember what that word is, right? But it's like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or no, it's okay,
Right.
because
You just
you jump around, not commit.
Mhm.
And with the book, right, we signed paperwork, and they gave us, X amount of dollars, and it's like it's a product you make, so it's kind of interesting where you have to abide by the rules, and if you don't, then I guess there's
Mhm.
no publishing.
So from the time you signed the deal to the time you actually submitted the final, before you submitted the book deal, was it complete? Like it's written, it's already, or you had a few chapters?
Yeah, we had 40,000 page manuscript,
Right.
but again, it wasn't perfect at all, as you mentioned. It's
Right.
probably like
So that's like the prototype.
it's a prototype, yeah. And then, for me, I really felt that we went through like a book, like Y Combinator.
A
Right.
book Y Combinator.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It was really interesting because
You went through You went through Techstars.
We went to Techstars, yeah. It's the same. It's the same. Yeah, it's the same analogy, right? Where you have a short amount of time. The deadline, instead of a demo day, it's book publish day, right? There's a little bit of a lag, right? Because once you have the final read of the manuscript and the managing editor says yes, there's just a 6 months time lag because they need to produce it. They need to
Right.
make sure that this is ready for manufacturing, ready for channel distribution, all these things. That's about 6 months or so,
6
maybe
months.
a little bit less. So 6 months ago, it was kind of ready, or maybe just a little bit less than 6 months. But for that, like, probably 4 to 6 month period, like, I felt like Techstars, every week we had to have a deadline of something. And, there was no stopping. It's like the train. It's like demo day, right? Like ultimately in Techstars or Y Combinator, like demo day is gonna come regardless if you slack off or not.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing kind of the same analogy, right? Like Dan, like they said, like next week one more revision, and then we're like, but you told us to write 2 extra chapters from 0. Yeah, it's still gonna be next week, right? So we're like, what?
That's
like,
hard.
We're like,
Right,
what's
right,
going
right,
on
right,
here,
right,
right?
right.
So, and then we thought after that iteration again, So it's actually so for me, like same thing. Techstars, basically like you're doing kind of sprints, and then eventually, but you see progress, which is kind of cool, right? From like a manuscript which I thought was good enough but not really super good, to like it getting better and better and better with another editor that so then your expert rolls off like a mentor, right? Like Cassandra rolled off and said, okay, I've already done what I can as a content editor. I'm going to hand you off now to the structural editor. More iterations, blah, blah. And then book cover, right?
Right.
Now you have a book cover team, giving you proposals, and then you give feedback, blah, blah, blah. So all these things kind of happened. And then once locked in, demo day happens. And that's what we just had here, which is the global public launch physically. There was a virtual kind of availability, right? It's called availability.
Kindle,
Available in Kindle and Amazon.
the
It kind of
website.
was a rolling thunder, sometimes available in Amazon and a little bit in Barnes & Noble. But really
Books.
now, like now we can say that we basically did the global physical launch worldwide. a couple of days ago here in the Philippines.
You going to Singapore? I
Yeah,
think,
for
next
like
week.
basically it's like a regional launch, right? But the global launch was here.
So, for those who don't know, we actually have a publishing, Benilde Publishing. So, I think we were chatting with Earl. I said, maybe there's a way, I don't know, maybe Benilde Publishing we need to do a deal with Penguin Random House and reprinting. I have no idea how that works, but and by the way, I did submit a book proposal for Benilde Publishing. It's about Tagalog, like a Tagalog phrase book, because everyone's bugging me, like, yeah, I want to learn Tagalog, but there's really no.
I could use that.
Yeah, see. So everyone's like, so I said maybe I'll write the book. Maybe, I don't know. So this is encouraging to me. So in a few minutes, I'll try to see if you can read off your favorite parts of the book, maybe. So maybe, yeah. So I'll give you time to, I don't know, browse through it. But you kind of said, people were
Maybe.
people were criticizing the book, right? So now that you've virtually launched it, you've publicly launched it, what's the reception so far? What have you heard, negative, positive side, as you've launched this book globally?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Paul. I would say, like, it's as I flew in here on Saturday and did the book talk. It's surreal. Like, I guess a little bit of jet lag, but also just not like, it's hard to believe I even did something like that. It's like one of those things where maybe you're successful in business, right? And you're like, oh, I can't believe that deal worked. Like, I can't believe they signed the papers and they gave us equity and all that. But I think with this it's a little bit mind blowing, since I've had friends and I saw this professor from Auburn University buy the book, and I said, what? Like, I've definitely, there's been times where we've failed, right? Like, we've failed at, I don't know, getting this done sooner, or getting paid for certain things, or like just hitting the wall or getting stuck, and then you all of a sudden have like some success, and you didn't even expect, like, a professor. And I actually interviewed UC Berkeley's innovation director or chief innovation officer, Darren Cook, on the podcast, and he said he would buy the book, and I'm like, man, I'm not that smart. I don't have a Stanford degree or well, I always knew I was cool, but it's like it's like I didn't invent sliced bread or something. So yeah, it's been a good thing to it's a dream come true, really. Like what's it called? You have those days where you don't think the ball is moving, but maybe it's somebody who jumps on the website and is interested in something you do, or you get smarter every day, right? Like, I think throughout this book we got a lot smarter. We learned a lot of stuff that you can't learn in a course. Right. Yeah, you got to learn through in business. You got to learn through life. So it's interesting. We wrote about a business book and all that, where I've never taken a real business class exactly. So I actually kind of taught one yesterday at the Asian Institute of Management. So it's funny how life works, but I think that the startup mindset is really just what do you call that? Flipping the script and being unorthodox and not following the rules and all that. So and it's also a lot of it is breaking the rules and making your own rules.
One thing that one major lesson, and I'll read kind of one of my favorite parts here. But yeah.
Comments. So for reception.
Yeah, I mean, general reception actually, I don't know. I'm actually surprised, and the surprise comes from, I thought that this was common knowledge. Right? I thought that startup mindsets is common knowledge, and then people approach us and say, "Wow, like, I'm glad that you wrote this." And these are from founders.
So Cassandra was right.
Yeah.
Cassandra was right. Cassandra was right. Your content editor. You needed to define what
Yeah.
startup mindsets
I thought
are,
because maybe
people
we're
don't even know what
founders.
it was.
I used to be inventors. I thought it was obvious. I thought it was normal. And for people, even let's say who are founders or investors and stuff, they're like, actually, I'm glad the book was written on it, because there's not really much that focuses on the startup or the founder mindset.
I saw Bowie guys speed read it on your launch in Fully Booked. I was just gonna ask you something. Did he say anything about the
Yeah,
book?
Bowie again is a startup founder who moved to the Philippines, very successful, exited to LinkedIn. He said the book is great. The one thing that he was challenging us, Dan, is, and again, perfect, right? I love feedback. He was saying, do we want to highlight for people to look at their kryptonite, right? Which is their weaknesses, right? Because in maybe some ecosystems, like not so mature ecosystems, they might think that this is their limit, right? But I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because we wrote it, for example, we said, what's one of the chapters is called, what's your superpower and what is your kryptonite, right? Right? And obviously superpower is like, that's great.
Yeah.
But he said,
Your strengths.
your strengths. But then if you tell people also ask your kryptonite, that might impede people and realize, oh man, maybe I'm not ready yet.
They'll use that as an excuse.
Exactly. They'll
and
use this
think
as
of
an
mental
excuse
limit and
to
they
not
don't.
move forward.
Okay.
So what you should have emphasized more, or at least wrote in the book explicitly, like, don't limit yourself from the kryptonite, but we didn't write it, right? So that was a good feedback for me. So I'll read a part of a book that I like recently, because in the Philippines we've done a bit of a roadshow, and this question comes up over and over again, which is, in a risk-averse culture, how do you break free from to start a company or to take risk and stuff? And at least I wrote in one of the chapters, which is called Developing Your Startup Mindset. I put here, here are the 5 questions you must ask yourself before leaving the job.
Right, before making the leap.
Before making the leap. And the first question, and again, there's obviously more things after the main headlines, right? But the first question that we wrote here was, do you have a business or just an idea? An idea, or it actually could be a business, right? The second question, which is a bit contrarian, is, are you financially prepared to take on the business? Because a lot of people, especially to be honest, a lot of like younger people say, I don't really care, I'll figure it out. But it's so difficult to start a business, to keep on going to business. And people tell me I can't do the business because I have to think about eating or my family. So you need to ask yourself honestly, are you financially prepared to take on a business or not? This is the most controversial one that I keep on repeating in every stage, but people like it and I like it too. Will you have regrets if the business does not become successful? Wow. Right? So last 2 questions is, do you and your family, especially in your family, all know the sacrifices needed to give it a shot?
What it takes.
Because a lot of times people blindly, and this is, to be honest, a lot of people or entrepreneurs who are successful, they're so blinded that they don't even think that there's collateral damage. Right? So we had to write it here. And then the last one, which is practical, we put in here, do you have an unfair advantage in building this business? Honestly.
Right.
Honestly. So these are like, again, actually, there's more stuff there, but this is the headlines, right? This is the headlines, right? But these are like questions that we have here. I like it because, this touches on some things, but especially as I talk to more and more founders in places like the Philippines, I've noticed is that not everybody has asked those 5 questions.
That's such a potent quote, and so insight dense. I'll say it, insight dense. That if that's the only thing people discuss about your book, I think they'll go through this startup ecosystem longer, I guess. And it's a way. I think for me, I think now in terms of nervous systems. I think this is a very good way to prepare someone's nervous system and interrogate someone's nervous system if this is something they want to do, right? Meaning if they can't even seriously and honestly answer those questions, I guess they're better off being employed, right? So those are very insightful questions, especially that maybe as Dan is looking for his quote, right? Talk about that. Will you regret
I
it?
found the quote.
Yeah. Okay. Can you talk about that? Will you regret? Are you sure you will not? You will regret if it fails. Maybe you can go a little bit deeper on that.
So, and maybe this is a training for entrepreneurship programs in the Philippines. Sometimes I ask, why do you want to start a business? And I've heard so many funny is not a good term, sorry. Answers that surprised me maybe. Some people says because I want to be my own boss. Some people say because I see rich people or entrepreneurs, that's why I want to be entrepreneurs. Some people say it's like I want to be an entrepreneur because it just feels sexy. Or it's funny. Actually, no. Sorry. It's even worse. It's even worse. I want to be an entrepreneur because it's easier than having a job. And as someone, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like the opposite.
We're eliciting some strong emotions here.
Right? So no, right? Like, so that's why we say it's regret, because the likelihood of you succeeding being an entrepreneur or startup is very low. And you have to know that you're facing actually probably the hardest task of your life.
The boss battle.
But people think, oh no, because I want to be the boss. It's sometimes why people say, why are you being an entrepreneur? I want to be the boss. I'm like, no. And I forgot who says this, but maybe it's Elon Musk or someone basically said, like, once you decide to be the CEO or of your own company, you become the janitor.
And everything else.
Wow.
Because all the stuff, the bad stuff, goes to you.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, you're not. There's so much stuff that you have to do, and that's something that I know. So don't regret it. It just means that you have to work on something that you want to do, even if the odds are so difficult, right? So anyway, Dan, sorry, you found your quote.
I found two.
Yeah.
Please go ahead. Go, please.
Yeah, that's interesting, Earl. So I guess the first one was, if you think about startups, right? Like if you could all, like, even the audience listening, like, if you could remember who was the first startup founder or CEO that you ever met, and did you talk to them, and what was your opinion on them? So one story I put in here was, I was in San Francisco for spring break, and I was going to a bar called Golden Gate Tap Room in San Francisco, and I sat at the bar, and there was this guy there. He had his computer, and it's Sunday, and I'm like, man, people don't take a day off, like. And then, but he was a nice guy. He offered to buy me a beer. Wow. We were joking about random things and just being two dudes at a bar. And as we were getting to know each other, he tells me that, I started this startup company. It's called Blue Dot Innovation. They raised a Series B recently, so I wanted to shout out to a friend of mine, Emil Devitt-Yan. He's a good dude from Australia, so not exactly Asia, but close enough, right? Got to go there one day too. But he was just telling me he's had a startup, and he said this is geolocation, and I said, I don't know what that is, man. Like, but it doesn't matter, because I think we just bonded over, like, sports and watching TV, and I think a little bit later, like, I think that left an impression on me where I said, CEOs typically, thinking about, like, your parents' job and how they spoke about their boss, and even seeing, like, the struggles of being a manager and all that, you come to realize that these are just people too, right? Like, Earl's been a CEO, he's been a manager, he's been various job author. So it's like, you come to realize that these job titles, they don't mean anything when you leave the office, right? Or, like, we're all just people who want to love what they do and go home and make money, I think. But what I learned from that was that no matter your rank, like, I was a college kid and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. and he was nice enough to buy me a beer, and then he'll give me some mentorship and just wanna hang out regardless of job incomes and titles and where you're from. Like, I don't think that matters. And if you think about life like that, I feel sorry for you, because you shouldn't be friends with people just because they look a certain way or make a certain amount of money or have certain accolades. That's
Get better friends.
get better friends. Do better. But another story too I wanted to share was a friend of mine who I hung out with in Brooklyn, New York. It was my first time in New York City. Ravi Kurani, he was a guy who graduated from UC Riverside, where I went to school, and he was a startup guy who made a company called Sutro, and they measure water quality in swimming pools and maybe jacuzzi too. But I was just getting to know him over at a bar again too. And lo and behold, you talk to somebody over some drinks, you learn a lot about them, and you learn about yourself as well. And he was telling me he put $20,000 on his credit card for the company to survive, and he was sleeping on floors, and he was getting rejected all the time, and now the company's still around. So, and they sold to Sandy Mark, and he does well financially, I'm assuming. But just to be able to take a risk with your own money like that,
Right.
and not know if it's going to work out, like that's the spirit of entrepreneurship, and I think that's contagious. And even here, like you'll see people who are on the street and they're fighting for their life, right? Like, so it's like you can't not applaud that. So I think that the book has a lot of stories, and I feel like a lot of other business books, they maybe the ones that are really successful or whatever, they're always glamorizing, like, oh, we made successful things. They don't know
The poster boy.
they don't know the tears and the failure and the pain of negative credit card debt, all that stuff. So that I think that serves you well in life once you can endure a lot of challenges. So getting over those challenges and just knowing there's going to be more coming your way, like that's what it's about, and it's about growing along the way and just having fun.
Well, thanks for that. So, maybe the next question, like, it's not normally normal that a book like this gets written by two people, right? It sounds like there's like two voices there, and I think it works because, right, you're friends, right? And so the question is, what's next?
Earl's Kuya.
Yeah. Do you plan to do more of this? I guess Earl was talking about the other mindsets books, but I think your collaboration is really good, right? So what's in what do you plan to do next? Is this collaboration the start of something big, or you said this is one and done? I think this is a good experience. I don't want to put you on the spot, right? But so you can, if you don't want to answer it directly.
I have acid reflux.
Yeah.
No, I think the key is how do we. I think it's more of what's the mission of the book, and that's where Dan and I align, right? Like, we just want this idea to propagate to more people in the world. How it's done is something that I think we still have to figure out. Like, do we create a course? Like, do we, I think Dan and I are like, oh, maybe we should become like professional keynote speakers or something like that, like, or share it, or all these other things, right? Like, all these other things, right? I think the how is difficult, right? Right? Or maybe create a training course for companies, right? So all these things are all in the table, but I think that's the key is we think that this is an idea that could really help a lot of people. An idea that could help also a lot of organizations, because I think the world needs more startup mindsets, right? So I think that's really the key. I am not a very good writer, and Dan knows that too. So I would definitely need someone like Dan if you write another book, because I am definitely not a good English person. So I think this is exactly how founders are created, where I had a strength, a superpower, Dan had a superpower, and I think combined we're like the Justice League, right? So
Yeah. I think there's always got to be more, right? Like, we were writing a book. I think there's a new chapter once you finish something, right? So just got to write it yourself and see what the future holds. I think people are gonna want to stay tuned for what happens next. But I honestly think that's the beauty of the future, where I think right now, like in the world, you try to know all the answers to what you're going to do, and that takes the fun out of it, to be honest. But I think there's a lot of potential, right? Just coming here to the Philippines, I'm blown away by what you guys do sometimes too, and yeah, I'd even want to consider moving out of America, because I think America's well, I wouldn't want to get too into America, but I think that, you know, it's always time to move somewhere new and do something new, and yeah, maybe that's next. If somebody wants to hire me here or work with me, and we could do something.
Maybe Penguin Random House.
But I think there could be a new book in the future too. I just, you know, we don't know what to call it, or we don't know. But writing a book, it was a lot of fun. As much as we said, there was a lot of certain uncertainty and struggles. I think, like, you know, if somebody out there wants to write a book, I just say, try writing it. You know, like, it's not like it's gonna you know, hurt you in the long run if you did write a book. I think, like, whenever you speak your mind, it's a powerful thing.
So, I guess you had a very strict guideline, right, from Penguin not to use AI. I think 2019 it wasn't such a big thing, right? But now it's like it's so easy to do that, right? So maybe what would be your future advice to future authors? I guess, like you said, the manuscript, it's like uncode freeze, right? And 40,000 words. But now I guess if you have the AI, you have before you submit the manuscript, no, before you sign all the paperwork, right? They what do you call this? You can do a lot of iterations, editings, and all that. But what would be your recommendation to future authors, especially now that they have access to these very powerful machines, right? That it's almost trivial now for them to quote unquote write a book. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know if they're gonna do that. They should put AI in the author space too. You know, like.
Okay.
But I think I don't know. I mean, I think technology is something you gotta adapt to and use to your advantage. It's how history, how people and civilizations have evolved in history. But you know, I'm an old school guy. Like, I like to do things like the old way, I think. But I would just say that I don't have anything against it. It's more like if you need it, maybe use it, but don't use it and rely on it, because your skills are going to
Don't
diminish.
make it a crutch. Don't make it a crutch.
Yeah. I think AI is gonna. It's obvious. Well, technology's obviously made people lazy and maybe lost their touch of, like, the human side of things. So I don't know.
So I think AI should be a tool of the writer to maybe brainstorm. But ultimately, you have to ask why you're writing a book. Is it, I mean, to be honest, I know some people who say, oh, I'm going to write AI because I want to sell books, which also is good, right? That's fine. So they're trying to, like, optimize that, let their AI write it, and then they just publish the book, which is fine. But I remember my 10th year reunion in Stanford, and Startup Mindsets, or I call it, I don't know, some other book name or something. I said, it would be nice to just have a book in your name. And it's like, oh, what are you going to write? How do you have the time to write? And I was like, oh, maybe I'll just get a ghostwriter. And then my classmate said, like, is that as satisfying as you writing it?
Wow. If you're really honest with yourself, are you okay with putting your name on something that someone else actually wrote for you?
I think for some people it's fine, right? It's objective. But for, you know, Dan and I think this is kind of why it's such a, for me, it's emotional, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure, Dan, for you too, like to see it come to life and people asking for it, because it really came from, it's like
blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, I mean, blood, sweat, and tears. And then I don't know if you were in that, you know, talk, Paul, but in my first class in UP, I don't know if I mentioned the story to you. My first class in UP was philosophy ever in my life. My first college class, 8:30 a.m. on a Monday, was philosophy when I was a freshman in UP. It was philosophy. And the topic, until now I remember, it says, what is the difference between an animal and human? I don't know. You're a philosophy person, Paul.
Yeah,
Any?
it's the neocortex. Only human beings have a neocortex.
So similar, but philosophically.
Sorry, that's my answer.
No. So for
Of course,
the
you have
audience,
a soul, a
yeah.
spirit, but scientifically,
Yeah, no.
only human beings have a neocortex.
So there's two parts. One is the interesting thing, which is the difference between humans and animals also is that eating is social. So that's one. But the other one really blew my mind, and until now I remember. It says we have the power to create.
Yes.
And imagine, book is the same thing, right? Like we had this idea, Dan and I was like, we're gonna write a book 5 years ago or 4 years ago. And we had the power to create. So imagine if you use AI to create. Did you give away that power to create? You can use it to help you create, like a tool. But you yourself, how do you harness your full power to create rather than to give away that power to create?
Yeah, I guess that's what the neocortex is, because the neocortex means you have the ability to see the future. So animals can see the future. That's why, remember that, that in Genesis, right now, by the sweat of your brow. So Adam now has to live with the idea that he's gonna die someday if it doesn't.
So
plant.
dogs don't have that?
Yeah, meaning they're not gonna invest and work so they don't die. So you understand? So that's what only human beings have that. So I guess we know how to be creative to survive. That's a very interesting. Yeah. So we should not. We should not let that go, right? So, okay, we're about to end, but so I guess this is the global tour, right? Launch, right? And you're gonna be in other places. So maybe, in a way, that's cool, right? Like it's like a band. You do a tour, right? So maybe talk about your experience, and then where are you gonna go next, right? So maybe there are people listening and they wanna. I guess there are people asking like in Singapore, where's the launch and everything. If you have details, maybe you can share. But even the idea, right? You had an idea where it's good to actually maybe do this on a 1 year launch. Like, I think that's what Taylor Swift and everyone, like they have an album, they takes them 2 to 3 years. Except the pandemic, I think Taylor released 2 albums, right? Then you spend a year to promote it, and then by that time you have ideas for the next one. So maybe walk us through that, where you're going next, and what are you looking forward to in your global launch tour?
Yeah. I mean, this is just the start, right? So it's like we don't really know. Well, we're gonna be in Singapore, or Earl will be in Singapore on the 9th or something like that.
I'll be there. I'll be there on Saturday in Singapore for the regional launch. So Penguin is working with a bookstore called Book Bar to do like the Singapore launch of the book. Actually, it's pretty interesting. There's actually a lot of RSVPs for the book launch. That's not even related to the Philippines, so it's so exciting. So maybe startup mindset really transcends, right? Which is great. And then Dan, you'll be in Cebu, so we're trying to see if people from Cebu listening, maybe do a Visayas or a Cebu book signing, Dan, right? So maybe that's in the cards.
Message me. I'm part of this. We have Sinigang Valley in Metro Manila. We have Sutukil.
Yeah, that's
Sutukil
right.
Valley for Cebu. It's startup founder. So I'll so we can promote it.
And then just multiple things. So for example, I'll probably be in San Francisco Bay Area in April 30. I'm giving a talk at Stanford, and I'll probably mention the book there and kind of make it also an informal book launch too. And then I think we just have to see. I mean, this is our dream, Dan and I, where we want to do like a global road show. Remember, we're like, it'd be cool. Yeah, New York maybe next. Dan has someone in Houston, so it might be both of us. Sometimes it's one of us. But I think
Joe
it'd be
Rogan
cool.
and Austin.
Yeah, we're gonna go and go all around, right? So, I mean, it's pretty exciting. Dan, any thoughts?
Yeah.
Certainly other podcasts too would be fun to do. Like this is really really cool just to talk to people like Paul and Noli, and going places is the new thing to do. I think like we we have a lot of ideas in store. It's just nothing necessarily materialized right now or like confirmed. But yeah, if there's other podcasts that want to talk to us, I think we'll be doing that a lot. And yeah, I guess final thoughts, like plug social media or like
Yeah, just before that, I'll just connect. In stand-up, we call it callback, right? So I'm gonna call back, saying a lot of startup founders, like when they read book, said, "Oh, we didn't even know about these things," right? So you're talking about people who are already in an existing startup ecosystem. I guess Philippines were around 15 years, right? Since ID Space and before that, but they found this book very useful, right? So maybe, and we'll add the global tour, right? So what do you think happens when you introduce this book into places that doesn't even have a mature ecosystem, and you do a global tour, like based on what you've been the reception you're getting so far, right? That the surprising things or the encouraging things they get from just reading the book. So
So what pleasantly surprises us is that we thought it'd be specifically for founders or wannabe founders, but then some people are telling us this could apply to life, this could apply to my nonprofit, this could apply to the government, to corporation. So I realize it's kind of like anything else. Like you just put out the idea to the world, and it's like your baby. You let your baby graduate and go to college and stuff, and you don't know what they'll be. And I think that we're at this stage now where we launch now, basically like the baby or whatever, right? Like the book. Yeah. We launched this already, and that's
now
why.
has a life of its own, right?
Yeah,
it will be repurposed.
Yeah,
by
exactly.
Other people
And
for their
people
own,
will interpret
context.
it for their own. And I think that's the exciting
remixing,
part
yeah.
of now our stage, right? Because sometimes you write a book or you do some project and you think it's going to be X, when actually how people interpret it is Y. And I think that will be super interesting to see what that would be. In fact, that's probably one of our last lines in this book, where we said, we're excited what you do when you discover your own very, very own startup mindset. And I thought it was related to starting stuff. But then when now, after doing this tour, talking to more people, I realized what they'll do with their very own startup mindset might actually relate it to startups. It just might be relating to starting
It's a
something.
catalyst or
Correct.
something to
Starting
ignite
something.
them.
Exactly. So which is super exciting. Right?
You want to bookend that, Dan?
Could you repeat the question, sorry?
Can you bookend that, like a bookend? Yeah, on that thought.
Yeah, I think when you create art, there's always multiple interpretations about it. Like for example, Starry Night might mean something to someone else than what it means to me, and I think that like we had a question in the podcast I would ask: is business or is startups more science or is it more art? And I think when it comes to art, it's always they say beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? So I think like it's going to depend on what people say and what they want, what they gain based off of their life experiences and perspective on the future and all that. But I think like this is to empower them to think bigger and to not exactly limit their thinking and to just even if it's a feeling, like sometimes your feelings, right, like the brain is the feeling brain, the thinking brain, like a lot of times the feelings try to deter you from what you can really become. So I think it's about just knowing that that's in the cards and just like going big or going home,
Go big or go home.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we'll end this by asking you your where to get the book, social media. But yeah, shout out to our water sponsor for today, Sam Water. This is actually one of Sam Water by Lutz
Sam Water.
Ruby and Joseph Porky Parin. They just launched this February 7. This is the first of its kind. This kind of water design took them 6 months to get the design from their designers, but yeah, and I think they visited HiFi the other day, and now they're doing a deal with a recycling startup that we have. So I don't want to give details on that. I might be breaking NDAs, but but anyway, uh, thanks to Sam Water for this. And on that note, maybe you can share where people might get the book, and also maybe where they can reach you in social media if they have awesome ideas that they get after reading your book, or if there's errata or typos, I guess, where they can send that, right?
That's a good point. Yeah, so startupmindsets.com. We have a lot of information on the brand and the book and podcast. We also have on social media, LinkedIn, I'm just Dan Gonzales. And then Instagram, I'm dan.podcasts. And yeah, I'm looking forward to interacting with the new folks and sharing content there as well. It's crazy, that yesterday or even this last 5 days, I think I gained 50 followers.
Wow.
Or something like that.
Not bad.
Not bad, right? Not bad for just hanging out. And what else was there? Startup Mindsets Pod on Instagram too. And yeah, Spotify is a good thing to do. We host that there, and Apple too, and YouTube too. What did I miss? We're trying to write a newsletter now, so I guess it's just Substack at Startup Mindsets, but trying to grow that and figure out where to take that. But yeah, Earl, where you are?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, maybe you can share after the social media, the Filipinnovation, all the other stuff
that's
that
right,
you're
that's
doing
right.
at the
So
NIC.
a couple of things. It's available in the Philippines and fully booked for pre-order. I think it's still coming. The books is on the way, but it's available for pre-order and fully booked. You can also order it obviously in Amazon.com, where it goes, ships from somewhere else. It's in the Kindle in Amazon. So that's available to folks too. But yeah, if people wanna follow me, if LinkedIn actually is my main thing. So Earl mostly LinkedIn actually now. So yeah, Earl Martin Valencia. I think I'm the only one in LinkedIn if you find me. So that's kind of mostly my portal now. And then before I kind of end, I also want to plug the Philippine Innovation Awards. Basically, it's the country's national innovation competition and awards.
I think it's the first ever presidential
it's the
level.
It's the first ever award that is national and presidential level. And the three main areas are food and agriculture, healthcare, and education. So we're looking for interesting ideas to hopefully highlight, the country can highlight, right? So if people are listening in the podcast, don't forget to check out Philippine Innovation. It's in the NEDA site, so check it out. But then for Startup Mindsets, please support us, follow our social media, go to our webpage, startupmindset.com, and find the books in your favorite bookstore. Thank you.
So thanks, Earl Valencia and Dan Gonzales, authors of Startup Mindsets, A Blueprint to Thrive in an Innovation-Driven and Globally Connected World. This is Paul Pao, HiFi and TBI, HiFi Director and TBI Manager, and this is our Social Innovation and Talks. This is a new format. We usually just do Zoom, but we're trying the face-to-face version. And of course, this is Nols Araral. Close this podcast for us, Nols.
All right, so thank you everyone. Again, on behalf of Benilde Hi-Fi, thank you, Dan and Earl, and of course Paul, for joining us this afternoon. This has been another Social Innovation Talk podcast, only here at Benilde Hi-Fi. Shout out to Earl and to Dance for being behind the camera, and of course, again, Sam Water. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Startup Mindset. Get it. Thank you. Maraming salamat.